hi everyone. This is our first live presentation about the UBO register. My name is Esra and I will do the first part. I will do the introduction. I'm working as an attorney at Wintertaling in Amsterdam. So let's begin. So the UBO register will have a big impact on many Dutch companies and other legal entities. On June 23, 2020, this year, the Dutch Senate approved the Act on the Registration of the Ultimate Beneficial Owners of Corporate Entities and Other Legal Entities. This is called the UBO Register. It's based on a European directive. It's called the Fourth Anti-Money Laundering Directive. The Netherlands is obliged to implement and introduce the UBO Register. The background of the UBO Register is to prevent the use of the financial system of companies and legal entities for money laundering or terrorist financing. And with the UBO register, it will become clear who has the control or owns the company or other legal entity. The legislative proposal implements a European directive, as I mentioned, and that obligates every EU member state to have a UBO register. On December 10th, 2019, the Dutch House of Representatives has adopted the legislative proposal to implement a UBO register. June 23, 2020, the Senate of the Dutch Parliament adopted the legislative proposal, and then July 8th, last summer, the first part of the legislative proposal has entered into force. This means that legal entities and Dutch companies are now obliged to collect and retain the information about their UBO and keep it in their personal files. And then on September 27, 2020, the UBO register is live. This means that all this information that the company and the legal entities has retained and collect must be registered in the UBO register. I will explain how, which authority and all that kind of things later in this presentation. And so on March 27, 2022, that's the other deadline, because already existing legal entities on September 27, 2020 have 18 months to register the UBO. So that means that on March 27, 2022, all the information of the UBO of all the UBOs have to be registered within the UBO register. Now we all know how it started, and we had a slight introduction of the UBO register. The UBO register will be a public and central register. And in the Netherlands, the Dutch UBO register will be a part of the Dutch Commercial Trade Register, also called the Chamber of Commerce. Kamer van Koophandel in Dutch. The goal of the UBO register is to combat financial and economic crimes such as tax evasion, fraud, financing of terrorism, corruption and money laundering. Then, who will qualify as a UBO? Or let's start first with who is a UBO. The UBO is a natural person who ultimately owns or controls the corporate or other legal entity. And the control shall be determined by shares, voting rights, ownership interests, or other means. And later on in the presentation, in a different kind of video, then my colleague will explain more about who qualifies as a UBO. So it's important to note that UBO is a natural person, but there can be multiple UBOs in one corporate entity or in other legal entities. The UBO qualification criteria applicable are all different for the legal entities. So it will differ, and he will explain with examples and things like that. Then there's also the case when there's no individual that can be identified as a UBO or an ultimate beneficial owner, or there is doubt whether someone is a UBO. And in that case, the individual who holds the position of statutory board member, managing director, he will be the pseudo-UBO, and this will be registered in the UBO register as well, but it will be mentioned that it's not a UBO but a pseudo-UBO. In the next slide, we're going to check who is subject to registration of an UBO in the UBO register. The following entities that are incorporated and established under Dutch law are required to submit UBO information to the register. It's the private limited company, also called the BV, and the public limited companies, the NV, other than those listed on a regulated market or 100% subsidiaries of such entities. It are also the foundations, stichtingen, associations, verenigingen with full legal capacity or with limited legal capacity, but with an operating business. Mutual insurance associations, onderlinge waarborgmaatschappijen and corporations, coöperatie. Furthermore, all partnerships, maatschappijen, vennootschap onder firma, de VOF, and European public companies, SEs, European economic interest groupings and European cooperative companies, shipping companies, rederijen, and churches and spiritual organizations, kerkgenootschappen. So those are all subject to registration of a UBO in the UBO register. There are also a few legal entities that are not required to register subject to registration in the UBO under Dutch law. These legal entities are listed companies that are subject to certain disclosure requirements and they're 100% direct or indirect subsidiaries, sole proprietorships, eenmanszaken, and legal entities covered by public law. Associations of owners, some historical legal entities, UBOs of foreign companies are not included in the UBO register, in the Dutch UBO register. And this also applies to legal entities with their head office or secondary establishment in the Netherlands. These entities will have to comply with the regulation in the country in which they are organized or incorporated. So those are not subject to registration of a UBO in the Dutch UBO register. So now we know which companies or legal entities are subject to registration of an UBO, who will qualify as a UBO, and that a UBO is a natural person. And then the question, who are obliged to register the UBO information? This means who from the companies or other legal entities are obliged to register this information with the UBO register. This is first the management board or partners of the legal entities. These are required to submit UBO information and are obliged to ensure that this information in the UBO register is adequate, accurate, and up to date. They also will have to reply if there are any changes in the UBOs. But also the UBO itself is obliged to comply and provide all relevant information which is necessary for the entities, for the legal entities, so the management board of the legal entities, to meet the obligations I said before, following from the UBO regulations. This is called, in Dutch, de meewerkplicht. Finally, the competent authorities and qualifying institutions. In Dutch it's called de WWFT-instellingen, such as banks, lawyers, civil notaries, accountants, and tax advisors, are also obligated from September 27, 2020 to report to the Chamber of Commerce any mismatch between the UBO information in the register and the information they have about the UBO from their own research, because they have to do their own research. This is called, in Dutch, de terugmeldplicht. These are the persons, entities that are obliged to register the UBO's information. So now we know which entities are subject to registration, who will qualify as a UBO, or an introduction, a UBO is a natural person, and qualification depends on which legal entity. And we know who is obliged to register the UBO and the UBO's information in the UBO register. But which information will be registered and which of that information will be publicly accessible and which will be not publicly accessible. The information that will be publicly accessible of the UBO in the UBO register will be the first name and the surname, the month and year of birth of the UBO, the nationality of the UBO, the country of residence of the UBO, and the nature and extent of the beneficial interest held by the UBO. Then there's also some information that has to be registered but will not be publicly accessible. This is the citizen number, service number of the UBO, or the foreign tax identification number, the date, place, and country of birth, the address, a copy of a passport or ID, and documentation supporting the conclusion that the individual qualifies as a UBO, and the nature and size of the beneficial interest from the UBO. This documentation will be the articles of association, a shareholders register, deed of incorporation, such kind of documents, for a BV and NV at least. The UBO information in the UBO register will remain accessible for a period of 10 years after deregistration of the company or legal entity. However, in order to respect the privacy of the natural person of the UBOs in the UBO register, there are a few extra rules. So, first of all, everyone who will look into the UBO register has to be identified and registered before they will get access to the UBO register. Second of all, the UBO register is only searchable on the name of the legal entity and not on the name of the natural person, the UBO. And finally, there also will be a fee charged for every extract from the UBO register you will get. But please note that there are a few authorities that will always have access to this data, such as the police, the prosecutor office, tax and custom administration, and the financial intelligence unit. There are a few exceptional cases when the UBO may request to the Chamber of Commerce to shield the public data. There are just a few that is only possible when the UBO is a minor, on a security list, or there are guardianship or administration issues with the UBO. So in all other cases, the public data of the UBO will be accessible for everyone who will pay a fee, who will register and identify themselves. Thank you very much for watching this part of the video of the introduction of the UBO, where we just explained the main definitions of the UBO and how it will work. And in the next video, my colleague will explain more about how to qualify a UBO with some examples from the basis UBO to the more difficult ones. So please watch his video as well. And if you have any questions, please send them to the email address here under and we will reply as soon as possible back to you. Thank you very much for watching.